Reimagine Main Street activities and share a preview of the most recent survey of more than 2,200 diverse small businesses and open up for group discussion. So without any further wait, I am thrilled to welcome Andy Slavitt to the group. Andy serves currently as White House COVID-19 advisor. He has a long and impressive track record of leading some of the most important improvements in the US healthcare system over his career to date. Speaking personally, it gives me great confidence to know that you're leading the charge on vaccines, and which we all know is a critical piece of restarting Main Streets and MLK Boulevards. With that, thanks for being here. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you so much. And thanks to the entire team at Reimagine Main Street for everything you do. Your work is so important. And a number of you I've known for some time, and I'm just incredibly impressed at how things continue to grow. And you manage through some very difficult times. I'm really pleased to be invited today. And the timing is actually quite good because I want to share with you and ask for some of your support that will be important in the coming weeks as we seek to defeat this virus. You know, one of the consequences of having a administration that really diminished the importance of the virus, among many other things, is we really miss an enormous opportunity to unify the country and ask that we all come together and work together to help. Because we weren't willing to acknowledge the problem, we couldn't ask for people to get off the sidelines and do their part. And one thing I've learned about this country and the people in this country is that, particularly through adversity, so many of you want to know what you can do to do your part. And many of you already are. But I think what's been missing is a place that says, here's what we need most right now. Here's our priorities, and here's what we need to do to come together. We will defeat this virus. The only question is, how long will it take us? And will we do it in a way that we all come together and do it together? And I will tell you that that's one and the same question. The more quickly we can all unify, get on the same page, each do our part, that will be the quicker we can end this. One enormous part of this, Congressman Richmond is going to talk about shortly, which is what part Congress needs to do. I want to talk a little bit about what announcement we're going to be making tomorrow when we're launching a call to action for America's private sector to help us end this pandemic. And at that time tomorrow, we would love to be able to also announce our partnership with all of you. So let me just describe a little bit of what we're doing, because small and minority businesses and your members are absolutely critical partners to this pandemic and to what we want to accomplish. Pillars in your community, influencers among critical populations, employers of some of the most significant people. And people really do take their signs. They do take their signs from what they see all of you doing. And since many of you have asked what you can do to help, I thought I'd give you a peek of what we're going to be talking about. So the principles of this action are really threefold. First is we're going to be asking that businesses require masking and social distancing to protect their employees and their customers. That's something that I know many of you, if not most of you, if not all of you, are already doing. And so coming together to pledge this is important, but it's important for a lot of reasons, because there are a number of communities, of course, that push back against the government putting out mandates. But when they see business leaders and others taking those actions and saying that those are important actions, it holds even more value. It also communicates to employees that, yes, this is a safe place to come to work. We care about you and your health. Second is reducing barriers to vaccinations. So we are asking that employers help their employees make a plan to get vaccinated when it's their turn, set a goal for workplace vaccinations, and consider providing appropriate incentives appropriate to your business, like paid time off for the day or day after the second vaccination shot, or compensation for employees to get vaccinated, or any other action that will help free up the roadblocks for employees to get vaccinated. And of course, that means answering some of the very reasonable questions that they have about vaccines. And then the third and final piece is really to take the lead on communicating, not just with your employees, but also with your customers and people in the communities where you reside about the benefits of masking and vaccinations. We're asking businesses to amplify some messages that we will be providing from the CDC about masking and vaccinations that we know are effective. And we're going to be asking businesses to use their resources, their premises, even some of their products to help us promote some of this messaging, and of course, their websites. So I hope that this is of interest to you. I can imagine that for many of you it is. And so I'd ask you to consider whether you will join our call to action tomorrow and help to do the things that we described in those 3 actions with your employees and community. We will also be asking larger business organizations to participate as well. And I'm confident, hopeful that when called upon, America's business community will say yes. This just will begin our work together. We'll have more to learn along the way. We're not done with this pandemic, despite some signs of progress. And your work and your participation are key to getting us there. We know that there hasn't been the kind of leadership you've always looked for at the federal level. We hope we can provide that. We hope that through this forum and through connecting to us, to others on the call besides the Congressman and I, that you'll be able to have resources and places to go. So if you are interested in this partnership, Zach, who is on this call, who works with the Congressman, will be in touch with you in our formal call to action, which is going to be coming out tomorrow, where we're going to be inviting businesses to join. And then tomorrow at 4 p.m., I will host a call that we will love to have you and your members join, where they can hear from us directly about this call to action and what it means. Thank you again for letting me take some time in your agenda to talk about this important thing. And I'll stick around for a couple of questions. Thanks.
We so appreciate you being here, and we so appreciate the recognition of how important small employers are to ensuring that we get the country back on track and get folks vaccinated. It is now my great pleasure to welcome Congressman Cedric Richmond, Senior Advisor to the President and Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement. Congressman Richmond needs no introduction to this group. He served in the House for more than a decade, representing the amazing city of New Orleans, where small businesses have been hit especially hard, and where he led the Congressional Black Caucus. We couldn't ask for a better and more committed leader advising the President. Welcome, Congressman Richmond, and thank you for being here.
Well, let me just start by thank you for having me, and thank you really for pulling this together. People say all the time that small businesses are the backbone of the country, but the truth is, especially in Black and Brown communities, small businesses are the heart and soul of those communities. The business owners are community leaders. They become friends and families with their employees and their customers all at the same time. And we have to make sure that, one, we recognize that and that we support it. And so when we talk about small businesses now in this context of COVID-19, I think we have to make sure that we recognize and we articulate the best thing we could do for small businesses right now is to beat COVID-19 and reopen the country. And the question becomes, what are all the things we're willing to do? And we came up with a very bold and aggressive package to deal with COVID-19 and the economic crisis that ensued. And it cost 1.9 trillion. And it cost 1.9 trillion because COVID is a humongous problem. And so the first thing we would do is we would make sure that we have enough money to run a national vaccination program, because we know the sooner we can get shots in people's arms, the sooner we can open the country back up. The next thing we did was we put in there direct payments for families that need it. And so, but let's be clear, when we say families that need it, we are leaving the middle class in, because we believe that the middle class deserves help. And so then we go on to another $135 billion so that we can make sure schools have the resources they need to open back up, which means they can social distance, they can have PPE, they can make sure class sizes are smaller, all of those things that they're going to need to do to make sure that they can open in a safe manner. We put money in there for that. We put money in for unemployment insurance. And we know that many of you all may have had to lay off some employees through no fault of your own, through no fault of their own. And we want to make sure that we try to make people as whole as we can. So we put in $400 for enhanced unemployment benefits because there's 11 million people who fit in that category. And then just kind of summarizing and pulling up, the other thing that we put in there is food assistance, because we know we have a bunch of vulnerable people in the country. I think 1 in 7 Americans report that they don't have enough food to eat and that they're food insecure. We have, and the bill would, through the child tax credit increase, the earned income tax credit, it will reduce those that are living in poverty by, those children living in poverty by 50%. And with some targeting, it would lift 34% of the people of African Americans that are living in poverty out of poverty, 40% of Hispanic Americans that are living in poverty out of poverty. So it is a good bill. It's a comprehensive bill so we can stop chasing COVID, but get ahead of it, get in front of it, beat it, and start our road to recovery. So with that, how about I just turn it back over and then we get into question and answer.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We are now going to ask that if you have a question for Mr. Slevitt or Congressman Richmond, to please use the raise hand function here on Zoom. If you're not able to use the function, please feel free to just chat it to me. We're going to be looking in the chat. Use the chat function as well if you per se want to just ask your question there, and we can also pull from there and ask as well. As you see from the slide, if you click on participants and then raise hand, you'll be able to use the function. Let's start first. I see that we have a couple questions already there and hands up with Ramiro from the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you so much, Renee. I want to wish my best to everyone that's joined us today. And thank you, of course, Mr. Slavitt, and of course, Congressman Richmond, for making time for us today and your servant leadership at the federal level during these trying times. A little over a year ago, many of us came together to be a part of an initiative to respond to COVID-19 and this pandemic. And we're very proud to be part of Reimagine Main Street. It's made up of a diverse group of national diverse small business champions and owners. And our effort is to do exactly what both of you have stated is President Biden and Vice President Harris's commitment is to bring COVID-19 to its knees and rebuild our economy. Over the last year, we've met on a monthly basis, and we've met to share insights and keep each other informed. And in December, we're very proud that we were a part of this at the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce with 5 million Hispanic-owned businesses. And as the Congressman said, 40% of Americans who are Hispanic, the 61 million, although contributing $2.6 trillion to the economy, 40% are still below the poverty rate. And a third of our businesses have closed temporarily or permanently. And we're very proud that 25% of Hispanics are Afro-Latino, and we're Asian and Caucasian. And so we're an ethnic group. And this diversity really is needed now in our unifying effort. And so we're proud to be part of this initiative of our other national leaders focused on business and small business. So really what I wanted to say is we're very happy with the announcement on Monday. We've announced it to our members. The desire to focus on small businesses in the first 14 days is commendable, and the other initiatives to help businesses below 20 employees. And so really my question, I'd like to get to it after thanking each of you for making time, is that the Reimagine Main Street initiative work, how can we all support you with vaccine education, access to capital, which we need, and access to contracts, at the federal and private sector level, and then establish continued policy to move the needle in the positive direction. So with that, Congressman, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Slavitt. And that's my question. How can we be more helpful?
Well, let me just start by, laying out one or two things, and that is this president's commitment to small business. It's not lip service. He absolutely believes it. He's committed to it. You've seen a number of actions that he has taken, even if you look in ARP, the $15 billion fund that he set up just for small business grants. And if you look at what he did with PPP, and then the other 35 billion that's in the ARP that we're going to try to leverage to 175 billion for low cost loans. And if you look at his Made in America executive order, it also talks about small businesses and utilizing minority businesses. And so it's going to be a common theme throughout our government. I think that our small business administrator nominee is a phenomenal candidate and is going to do one hell of a job. But the fact that we raised it up to a cabinet level shows our commitment to understanding how important it's going to be. So I would say, to answer your question, how could you be most helpful? One, we need to pass the ARP. And that is to really drive home to other small businesses and people around the country to voice that they want it to happen. Now, look, it's there. I think 74% of Americans support it. That's 90% or 80% of Democrats. That's 60 something percent, high 60s of independents, and 50% of Republicans support it. It has Republican mayors and governors that support it. We just don't have Republican congresspeople. And look, we're not going to let them hold us hostage or hold us back from delivering. So the more you can talk about the need for it, and look, you all know the need more than anything. If the economy shut down, you don't have customers, and which means you have to lay off your employees, which we know for small businesses, we consider to be part of the family. I grew up in a small business, and my mother viewed her employees as family members. And so we need that message out there, and we need people talking about it. And then as we shift from COVID and we go into infrastructure and other things to create jobs, we need to just make sure that we're being very intentional about making sure that these projects are not bundled so big so that small businesses can't get the bonding or can't float payroll long enough. We need to make sure that government is paying quickly so that people can manage the contracts. And so all of those things are things we are talking about within SBA to move the needle forward for small business.
Thank you so much.
And I'm going to add a little to this, if I might. Another part of the question, and I have to say, I would have begun the answer just saying the same thing that Congressman Richmond said, which is the ARP is critical to all of our ability to get this pandemic over with as quickly as possible. Now, I want to ask a very specific part of your question, Romero, which is, what can you do with regard to vaccine communications? And this is a very important question, because what we know is that there is more hesitancy among, the data tells us, around taking vaccines in ethnic communities. And those that hesitancy comes from legitimate questions and concerns that people have. It comes possibly from not putting as high a priority on vaccination. And today it comes from not having, quite frankly, equal access to vaccines, which is something that we're working desperately to fix. And we will, and we'll, in part, the additional amount of vaccines that we're going to be producing and that are going to be coming online will help with that. But what we know is that people want to hear from people locally. They want to hear from their doctor, their pharmacist, their friends and family members, and they want to witness people that they know taking the vaccine, because many of the fence sitters, they just want to see other people having done it. And the good news is that the efficacy and safety data is extraordinary. It's very, very positive. So what's happening is each month we go along, more and more people are moving from fence sitter to wanting to do this. But that has to be an active part of conversation and dialogue, making it easier to get vaccinated, giving folks time off, talking about why you got vaccinated when the time comes. That stuff makes an enormous difference.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you all so much. We are actually a little short on time of the administration staffer, so we're going to take one more question. But what we would love to do is, I see there's numerous hands up. If you can chat us those questions, we'll make sure that we connect with the administration and follow up on those questions for you all. The next person is Candace with Women Impacting Public Policy.
Hi, thank you so much for being here with us today. To both you, Congressman Richmond, as well as Mr. Slavitt, I really appreciate it. You know, this conversation is so timely and informative, and certainly imperative, right, to helping women-owned businesses across the country during this time. My organization, Women Impacting Public Policy, recently joined Reimagine Main Street, and we are really excited to be a part of this group that really focuses on the recovery for small businesses that were hit the hardest, right, during the pandemic. I happen to be really excited to hear about the call to action in the private sector, as it is something that's very important to our organization as we work daily to sort of bridge the gap between public and private sector buying groups and our women business owners. WIP is focused on, from a policy perspective, several critical issues, some of which you've talked about, around creating parity for women-owned small businesses and federal contracting, access to capital, as we know, rethinking our workplace development, infrastructure improvements, and certainly the global economy. As the largest women-owned small business organization in the country, representing the more than 12.9 million women-owned businesses, I'd like to ask, with your call to action that you are going to do tomorrow, what can we do to assist moving the needle on that side of the house, especially for those of us who have really great relationships and partnerships with the private sector?
Well, maybe I'll take the first stab at this, and thank you, Ms. Waterman, for your question and for all your great work. You know, I just want to repeat some of the themes that I talked a little about earlier. You know, when it comes to putting this behind us, I can't imagine doing it without the support of businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, because otherwise you have the government talking into the wind. So to the extent that what we will do is we will share all of our research with you on attitudes, on things we're hearing, on what people are responding to, on very legitimate questions that people have. You know, we don't believe that having a question about taking the vaccine makes you an anti-vaxxer. We believe that you deserve a straight answer to those questions, and we want to help provide them. So it's essential that we all work together, you know, in this regard, because if we don't, then people will go where? They'll go on Facebook to get an answer for whether they should have a vaccine, and they will read something that was put forward by someone's cousin. And guess what? That stuff circulates, as we know, fast, and that affects people. So having all of you, as of tomorrow, first of all, to the extent that you agree to join us in this call to action, and then you in turn call on the small businesses that you work with, that will create incredible momentum. And then we will supply the resources to you to help you in your communication effort and to help you have answers to the key questions for your members. But at the same time, it's important that people get to hear things in your words. So we'll supply you with facts, but importantly, having you champion this and having your business owners champion this in their communities is what's going to make all the difference. I also will say that, as Congressman Richmond said, having your organizations vocally supporting the American Rescue Plan and what all that's in it is essential, because sometimes people in Washington lose sight of how this really impacts people. And so hearing from you is just couldn't be more important.
Well, I thank you, and you can certainly count on WHIP to support this. And I am excited because we are holding a demystifying the COVID vaccine event on March 11th. So the information you provide will be very timely, particularly for our Black and Brown communities.
Great.
Look, I think that all the small businesses are their trusted voice and a trusted source of information. And the hesitancy that's out there is real. African Americans know very well that there was something called the Tuskegee experiment, where the government experimented with medicine on them. And so we have to be very transparent and honest about the vaccine and the fact that it was developed under a president who lied over 17,000 times. So as we started to do focus groups, people just didn't understand how vaccines normally take 5 to 10 years to be developed. We developed in less than 10 months. And how do we know it's safe? And so the more information that we give, people feel safer. And that's why the president and vice president took their vaccines on TV. But we need people to understand that if you care about your parents, you might want to get vaccinated. If you care about your communities and others, you may want to get vaccinated. And that is the quickest way for us to get out of this. And so passing the ARP is also important because it has the money for us to go into communities and vaccinate in communities that may or may not have access. So we will have government funded vaccination sites. We will have mobile sites. You see that we got creative in the spirit of equity and did community health centers, and hopefully we'll get up to all 1,378 of them. We did pharmacies. And so we're going to keep thinking out of the box to make sure we don't leave people behind. But we also know that we have some work to do in the trust space, and we're going to work to make sure that happens. But we're going to do it with honesty and putting Vivek Murthy out there and putting Dr. Fauci out there to talk about the science behind it and that it's safe.
Thank you so much. We want to thank both of our guests, Congressman Richmond and Mr. Slavitt, for joining us today. We really, truly appreciate the time you spent with us. And we hope that we can have you back on again. As you can see, there's a lot of excitement and engagement and resources that people are trying to get connected with. So we will be so delighted if you will be able to join us again in the future.
Pleasure.
You got it. I'll make that commitment.
Thank you so much.
And
We're telling Zach to scribble it down now, Congressman.
Awesome. We are going to continue on with our meeting for today. And more specifically, we want to provide a few updates. And as you see, we have continued engagement with the administration and will continue to do so. Over the course of time since December, we have been chatting with numerous administration affiliates and staffers and trying to connect and figure out what resources and opportunities Reimagine Main Street can work with the administration in helping small businesses. Additionally, we also hosted several focus groups with which some of you on this call were participants of, where we focused on the AAPI community, Black and Hispanic Latinx small business owners, and had really focused dialogue conversations about the ecosystems in each diverse group. And then finally, we also conducted a survey to which Tammy is going to give you guys an amazing preview, but it was on diverse small business owners on policy priorities and preferences. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Tammy to talk more about the survey.
thanks, Renee. As we all know, getting data on small businesses disaggregated by race and ethnicity is challenging. And as many of you know, in partnership with many of you, filling that gap is something that Reimagine Main Street has been committed and is committed to doing. In January, as the new administration and Congress started debating a range of policy responses, many of which you heard about just now, we put a survey in the field to get insight into policy priorities and preferences of business owners. As you can see from this slide, we got responses from a sizable sample, including more than 500 Black, 250 Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, and 150 AAPI respondents. Not going to walk you through the sample here, but trust us, it's a robust mix of solo, micro, small businesses that sustain households financially across the country. There's a lot of meat in the survey, and we will be preview a whole pack with you all later this afternoon. But I think we can boil it down simply to a bad news, good news, and opportunity story. The pain is not over for Main Street, especially for Black, Latino, and AAPI business owners. We see that changes announced to the PPP are a good start to meet business owner needs, but there is still more to do. Small business contracting and opportunities to close racial wealth gaps. As a top line, that's not surprising to any of you all, but I think the data might be quite interesting and helpful in some of your advocacy work. We know the pandemic has been devastating for many small businesses. There is additional confirmation of just how bad and for whom in the survey, but there's no reason to share that here. What I highlight was that when we asked business owners to look ahead through the next quarter and to the end of next year, it doesn't look, at the end of this year, it doesn't look great. Overall, 15% of respondents are not confident that they will survive through the end of this year. That's bad, but the differences by race and ethnicity are important, and they're troubling. Almost 1 in 4 Black business owners in the survey, or 23%, don't have confidence that they will survive. It's 1 in 5 almost for Latinx business owners, or 18%, and 17% of the AAPI business owners. That's bad. And when you compare it to white business owners, it's only 11%. It both affirms the changes to the PPP made this week and highlights that PPP and changes to the PPP are not likely to be sufficient. We presented business owners with a basket of 9 policy responses, and we asked them about how they would prioritize each. As you can see from this slide, overall, 2 issues universally emerged as having the most intense support across all segments. And that was getting the PPP and access to PPP relief and creating revenue growth opportunities through incentives for contracting with small businesses. Although the strongest intensity across all groups is PPP and contracting, there is a lot to unpack in the policy preferences. So, for example, we see clearly that, as expected, racial wealth gaps drive policy priorities and preferences. You can see here widely varying intensity of support for capital access and cash flow related policy priorities. There's more than a 20 percentage point spread between white business owners and Latino and Black business owners regarding intensity of their support for the PPP. The difference in intensity of support for tax incentives to support reopening costs between Black and white business owners is 47 percentage points. It's also a significant gap at 29 percentage points and 26 for the spread between AAPI and Latino business owners, respectively. Finally, you see a massive spread between the intensity of support for access to low-cost capital separate from the PPP among Black, Latino, and AAPI business owners. So that's a teaser of what we found. What's next from Reimagine Main Street on the data-driven insights front? We are planning a broad release of this survey for next week. We will be sending around the findings as a preview for you all. Will hit your inboxes. And we currently have a survey in the field to better understand the needs, constraints, and aspirations of small employers related to vaccines. With that, back to you, Renee.
Thank you so much, Tammy. And this survey is very impactful, and we definitely want to reiterate you sharing that with your networks when we provide the full results. want to also hop now into a discussion where we can talk through a couple of questions and figure out sort of next steps within this as well. The first question I would love to pose to everyone, and again, just use the raise your hand function to sort of get in a queue so we can get a good dialogue going, is do you think the 5 changes to the PPP that the administration announced on Monday will achieve their objectives? What else, if anything, is needed within the PPP? So I'd love to hear some ideas and some insight of what was announced, of course, right? How do we feel that is going to help with the objectives? And then what was left out, what is needed, and what also is necessary for the PPP to be successful? Martina, let's start with you.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I think some of the changes are definitely notable in terms of trying to be less restrictive, but there are unintended consequences that came with this round of PPP as they tried to be more transparent and eliminate fraud, right? That have created some ripes, I believe, in the system and slowed things down tremendously. And for us, I'm sorry to introduce myself for folks who don't know me. I'm Martina Edwards, serve as Chief of Strategic Partnerships for Access to Capital for Entrepreneurs, a CDFI in Georgia, focused on small business. The clients that we generally focus on, women, minorities, low to moderate income individuals, kind of underserved people in places, have already had this experience of a capital gap, trust gap, and knowledge gap over the years. COVID obviously has exacerbated that, having this PPP federal program where they were a little bit nervous and had some anxiety about utilizing it. Now we're experiencing, we've encouraged them, they've come to CDFIs, they've come to other intermediaries, and there is such delays in the system, and it's just not moving forward. And the risk, reputational risk, or whatever you might want to call it, hits us as a CDFI. So we've tried to handhold as much as possible, talk to, but our clients also are certainly, there is a level of sophistication and a digital gap that is so strong that we are experiencing with folks who are, if they have the things to download in the system, they're not uploading the right materials, and they think, well, if I just upload anything, this might work and help me out. So I'm perplexed on PPP as it currently stands. We are trying our best. There's a lot of staff time dedicated. We're a team of 22 that had 400% more loan volume in 2020 than we had in 2019. And so we're working with the same staff and dedicating a lot more capacity to PPP. So I'm looking forward to new leadership around it to see if we can iron out some more of these wrinkles and move people through the system faster, because there's so many denials that are happening at this point, or rejections rather, with different coding.
Martina, do you mind saying more about that different coding? Like, what does that mean specifically, and how is it impacting small business owners?
Yeah, so what that means is some as things move through the SBA system, if certain things aren't in properly, right, it will give a reject code, because it's a part of them trying to eliminate fraud in the system. And so there are many more kind of documents and things that are requested because of it. And it's just been causing challenges for our team that's managing that PPP process. So a lot less approvals have taken place to date, even for folks who were originally round one PPP, have not been able to move through the system as fast as they did previously. And then we have the newcomers.
True. I see Michael Banner, you've put some comments into the chat box. We'd love to come to you and hear some of your insights, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So, two things. So I have sat on the board of a large CDFI that did hundreds and millions of dollars of PPP loans in round one, the Community Reinvestment Fund out of Minneapolis. And I think for them, that one of the things that helped them is that they had been working on a system to begin with, and it had been funded to the tune of about $5 million. So when this pandemic hit, their ability to take in a lot of this work, which, kind of, I think Martinez really hit the button on, is that when you get a sheer increase in volume like that, you're not really prepared for that. And if you don't have systems to deal with it, that makes it really, really tough. And so they were able to do that. Banks brought money to them and they got a lot of people through the system. But, those are isolated set of circumstances. And I do believe that in order to look at this holistically, you're going to have a lot more people involved in this. And probably this notion of scaling everything is not going to help, because we've been talking about scaling for at least a decade in my experience, and we still have the same issue. So I think the Biden administration needs to think about how it engages, whether that is through governors and states who go to mayors. I don't necessarily believe that downstream from the federal government is going to be the most effective thing. And the other thing I think fundamentally is that some of the data that was shown, when you can see the differences in the API community. In my experience in California, we have a number of large MDI banks that are Asian. And so that helps that community be able to deal with some of these disparities, because they have a financial institution to go to that understands them. To the extent that Black and brown people don't have that, whether it be a bank that's led by people of color or even a CDFI that's led by people of color, I think that's also part of the systematic change that we have to think about.
Thank you for that. And I see that there's somebody that wants to ask a follow-up. I think it's you, Tammy. And then I wanted to go to Representative Myers of Wisconsin, because she was speaking about some of the state work that's happening. I want to know more about what she's thinking and how that's happening within the states.
Michael, your point is well taken, and I'm nodding vigorously. I guess the question I wanted to ask you is, are you hopeful, confident, or some other thought or emotion around two things? Three things maybe. The intent to fortify and invest in MDIs, the emergence of a network of Black-led CDFIs as an organized force, and some of the commitments among large financial institutions and others to both invest in talent and in communities that they've historically left behind. Are you hopeful, or what should we think about sort of what we're seeing?
Okay, so I will tell you that yes, in general sense, I am hopeful, because we have now more eyes and ears open about the problem. And, kind of the unfortunate thing is that the presence of this pandemic has put the spotlight on all of these deficiencies. I had been in this space long enough, since the 90s, actually since the 60s. I was a kid in Watts when we had the first riot. So I've seen history go through these kind of ups and downs. We have a problem, we get some focus on it, that is not sustained, and then it regresses. Problem continues to grow. We have another shock to the system, and we come back. So I think that that's the challenge, and I don't believe that without fortification of MDIs, CDFIs, and I used to be a banker, so I understand how a bank operates, what they do to make money, and what the issues are with them. And at some point, size in any financial institution matters, no matter what you are, MDI, CDFI, or a SIFI. It all matters, size does. And some of this problem is that we have to get things down into bite size. So a small business can actually have an engagement with somebody who can actually listen to them, understand what their problem is, and make a recommendation. You won't be able to, I think, in a large scale, but use technology, what I call kind of fast food finance, where you can use an app and you can go in, you can punch in some stuff, and then boom. I think we saw that a little bit with the PPP program, where all those who had the ability to take in input still couldn't deal with the volume of the need that was out there. And I heard this from a colleague of mine who works for Chase. And I was surprised that he said the PPP program in terms of the sheer volume by itself was more contact, interaction, or however they measure it, than the bank does in the normal course of business. So that should tell you something right there. And they're not set up, banks are not going to make money from PPP loan program. That's not what's going to happen there, my view. They're going to be part of the delivery system that help maybe solve this problem. But I do think that one example, and I'm not sure how much data is available, the Small Business Credit Initiative was launched during the Obama administration. I think 50, I don't know if all 50 states participated in it, but to me, that's an example of how it left the federal government, got downstream to the states, and then the states had to figure out the methodology to make it happen, within their own geography. And I think that includes working with local governments and local CDFIs and MDIs.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. If Representative Myers is still on, love to hear from you, and more specifically about what's happening in the states, specifically in Wisconsin. And then Davida, we could come to you. I see your hands raised too. And then also I want to pose this, as I know we're fastly approaching time. Please think through, and if you have comments that you want to talk about as well, whether it's with the Navigator program or if it's with the American Rescue Plan, we would love to hear from you as well. So please feel free to chime in.
I'm still here, Renee. One of the things that I wanted to bring up was just to piggyback on what Ms. Edwards talked about in her comments, as well as Mr. Banner. I think there was a big disconnect when it came to a lot of our minority-owned businesses with access to PPP. Like he said, we only have one African-American savings and loan, not even a full banking institution in the state of Wisconsin. So we have one. We have our chambers, and one of them is a CDFI. But that makes it that much harder for communities of color to have the access and, some of the resources that are available to do something like this. So I would wholly appreciate the administration giving explicit details when they bring things down and try to lead them to the states. If you are in a state like mine, they will find any way necessary to let that money dry up. Or to take as long as possible to meet. We were one of the least active legislatures for 2020, moving into January of 2021 when we came back into session. So that is something that cannot always be left to the states when you think about the mechanisms of stalling. And we still lost out on federal funding because of the timing in which we did come back to meet. When COVID first hit the United States in late February, early March, we didn't meet until April. And so we lost a lot of funding that could have gone to the people in our state. So I think that makes a big difference as well. And then for those businesses that were left behind, which many of them were African-American and Latino owned businesses, they were only relegated to getting an emergency grant of some sort, which was only $2,500 that was able to come from the funding that was given to states. So it totaled about 2.5 million when you look at some of the PPP dollars that were able to be distributed from, received from major corporations that are in our state. So there was no equity in distribution or in the application process, just like I think Martina was saying. So that's all I wanted to give input on, but I appreciate it, and I will be wholeheartedly trying to make sure that folks understand the ARP and moving forward.
Thank you, Representative Myers. Davida, I want to come to you, and then I see some people in the chat. I see a great conversation with Martina and Joyce Klein. So I'd love to engage you guys and pull you up to talk about sort of the engagement you're having in the chat there. Davida?
Yes, thank you, Renee, so much. And I'll be super quick. I wanted to specifically take a look at and just comment on question 2 to move us along to the Navigator program. And I have to tell you, Renee and other folks on this call, I think this is the most exciting part of the program for me, is the fact that the Biden-Harris administration, and I'm looking at the press announcement, is going to be identifying navigators to ensure small businesses and communities of color and underserved communities can better access the PPP program. And that sentence I took straight off the website, straight off their press announcement. And the reason why I just lift that up is because, number one, I'm wondering how the Biden-Harris administration is, quote unquote, identifying navigators. And then the second question, the second part, and I'll be, again, really quick about this, is that the reason why I'm so excited about this kind of navigator framework, this navigator model, is because the navigator model really draws from leaders and advocates and educators and mentors and interpreters that are right in our community, that serve as the conduit, or as we say, the connective tissue between the community and the government. And I'm just wondering, if they are identifying navigators, how can we make sure that we're not only activated and ready to ensure that our small business owners that we support get access to PPP funding, but man, we're activated and ready after the coronavirus, after PPP, because this won't be the only time in which we need to come together to make sure that our business owners are being heard and their concerns are being addressed by the government. So I'm just wondering, how can we make sure that navigators, that we can be activated and ready, however the Biden-Harris administration needs to use us going forward?
No, that's great. Tammy, did you want to chime in on that? I saw you nodding vigorously, so I know usually when you do that, you have some good comments.
I don't have any comments. I was just nodding vigorously. I think that's exactly the question. And so nothing.
Yeah, I wonder if Larry has some insights to that, given that he has a model in Chicago.
Yeah, hi, my name is Larry Luster from the American Business Immigration Coalition, also the Illinois Business Immigration Coalition. And we actually were the facilitators of the navigation model through the PPP. And here in Illinois, we had the Business Interruption Grant. And now we're in the second round of PPP, working with the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity here in Illinois to kind of, distribute those funds into the community to make sure that we, have our agencies kind of really reach into the grassroots of communities, particularly around Illinois. So what we did, so I can speak to the effectiveness of it. I was able to help so the way that we chose I'll go on first, how we chose our lead agencies and how our lead agencies chose their sub-grantees. So we chose our lead agencies based on other metrics, like if they were able to receive grants in the first place from the state of Illinois, did they have all their information kind of lined up, all that structural stuff. And then we dove in a little bit more just to see what their capacity was to do the work. And then if they really had some connection with smaller organizations that they've worked with in the past, to do the work, to really dive into the grassroots, work with those religious organizations and dive a little bit deeper past just, your Black chambers of commerce to those smaller nichier groups. So you can really reach into the mom and pop stores, your beauticians, your barbershops, et cetera, on down the list. So I think there needs to be a structured framework to make sure that we're getting the right lead agencies throughout the country, just to make sure it's facilitated right, to make sure they have the right community relationships, to make sure, they can touch the people that we're trying to reach. But the success of so we'll really have to work with the administration to really kind of smooth that out, just to make sure we have a structured process so no one feels shorted, but also, we're effective in our effort. But the model was effective. The reporting mechanisms that we used to make sure that the program was effective, spoke volumes to the facilitators that we worked with. So in my opinion, it was an effective. I think the administration is going to run this the right way. There's some things that have to be smoothed out, but I think we're going to be successful.
No, thank you for that. And I know there's a lot of conversation going on in the chat, but that just means we need to get together again and have another conversation about this and hear more about what each of you are doing with your organizations to help move the needle in this area. Want to turn over to Tammy to close us out, because I know that we are almost at time.
Terrific. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Clearly, there is a lot to discuss and a lot to engage around. A couple of things I want to call out. The first is we have a vaccine survey for small business owners currently in the field, and we're inviting you all to distribute it to your networks. The insights that will come from the perspectives of business owners about what they need to be able to engage in dialogue with their employees and workers to really customize and tailor what Andy Slavitt was talking about at the top of the call. We will be sending around information on how to distribute it onward, and we welcome you doing that. The second thing that's on our agenda is building on the conversation that we just started to have, but only touched the surface of here, figuring out ways to bring together a subgroup of folks to problem solve and exchange inputs related to the design of navigators. We have some folks like you, Larry, who are at the frontier and have experience, others who are trying to figure out how to do it, and inputs to the SBA folks from the ground will be incredibly helpful. And then the last point is that we will get the next monthly group on the calendar for March soon. In the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, both with thoughts, questions, and ideas, and to help us understand what we can do to make this group valuable to you all, and more importantly, or as importantly, the people who you serve. Thank you for taking the time, and have a great rest of your afternoon.